And Genshin Impact was revealed for the PS4 during the China Joy conference. We don't know if it's coming out over here, but they do have a website in English with...
I hope it does.
I really hope it does. I think Genshin Impact looks really cool. It's basically take Breath of the Wild, but make it anime. Like even more anime.
Even more?
It was way too... I watched the trailer. It was way too anime for me. Like,
Really? I think it looks great.
I think it looks really good.
But the notable story, so China Joy, obviously China's biggest gaming expo, massive expo out there, has been going for a couple of years. But this game made somebody so mad they broke their PS4.
And there were a ton of people who were taking pictures of them, like, holding up their Switches with Breath of the Wild playing, just flipping off the booth at the China Joy place because they were so mad about the, like, copying.
That's passion.
Yeah.
in thought, like, to break a PS4, you have to... That's not an immediate reaction, like, I'm
gotta
mad and I'm
bring
going to
it.
throw this water. That's like...
I brought my PS4. Oh, now I'm angry. It's also not good for you, and I don't think it taught the developer anything. But, like,
so you have to admit that there were headlines, like we wrote about it and Kotaku wrote about it, with an angle of, like, a fan got so mad at this clone that they broke a PS4, which is kind of why they do... why that protest works.
So now, it's obviously there have been, if you check the App Store, the Apple App Store, there have been a lot of Chinese-developed games that directly copy Nintendo franchises. This has happened, dozens and dozens of times. Most recently with a Pokemon game, with better animations.
Well, they
than
took
the original
those
Pokemon
animations
game.
from Pokken Tournament, which
I
is
see.
totally different from... Yeah.
But a clear ripoff. So I
Yes,
was expecting something like that, where it was a clear copy, and then I watched the gameplay trailer, and like it has some elements from like Borderlands with like it has combo attacks where you see the damages being displayed as numbers on the characters. So and then it had a scene where like a dragon attacks a town. Like it's not a ripoff. There's definitely something else going on.
And it also looks like you can play as different characters that all battle differently as well, so it seems to have different RPG characteristics, but it does, I mean, the world,
looks like it.
It looks very similar. If you look at the grass, you look at the world, you look at some of the enemies, and I know Tom pointed this out to me before. They even have enemies that kind of resemble the Guardians.
Yeah.
They have enemies that resemble Guardians, they have enemies that resemble Bokoblins, they have the UI with the selecting weapons that looks extremely similar. They have the bow charging animation that looks extremely similar. The Guardian laser shot looks extremely similar. I would say
it's not a coincidence.
No,
it's very
somebody
hard,
played
it's very
Breath
hard
of
to
the Wild.
defend.
Yeah, it's very hard to defend. And Per, you said it's not a ripoff. I would say it's not a ripoff, but it is ripping off Zelda.
It's
right?
looking.
Like, it's not just ripping off Zelda, but it definitely is very clearly looking at that game and taking things.
Yeah,
and then doing other things too.
So I got more like Musou vibes from the combat. It was like combat with big hordes of enemies and lots of like just damage going on in combos.
Really stylistic.
And it's not it's like the style looks like Breath of the Wild. The gameplay looks very different. There's no climbing.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's an exploration game the same way that Breath of the Wild is.
Which is why it's
Which is also very difficult to do, right? Breath of the Wild is a tough game to develop.
Right, and it's definitely why like it's this funny, weird gray area of it is copying Zelda, but it is not a copy of Zelda, right? Like that, it's not all or nothing here. It's like there's gray.
It looks like it.
Well, where do you draw the line? Because would you say, like, I mean, granted, these are made by the same company, but would you say Tekken and Soul Calibur are copies of each other?
Right.
Because they're both fighting games where two characters move in a 3D space?
And that was, and to your point, that was also...
Sorry, neither was on Nintendo. Soul Calibur 2. Soul Calibur 2.
You're fine.
Great. To your point, there's a similar thing happened right back when during the great MOBA wars of like 2012 and 2011 of like you had League of Legends and you had Dota 2 and you had Heroes of New Earth and you had all these different MOBAs, and every time after League of Legends became the most popular MOBA, anytime anyone announced a new one, it was, is a League clone. You're just copying.
Yeah.
Same thing with Fortnite.
Yeah, and even if they were doing something different or even if they were doing something unique, they just say it is. And like, you're right. It's this idea of like, where do you draw the line with similarities and especially similarities within a genre?
Yeah. I mean, there are obviously a ton of examples outside of these titles. Like I was expecting both of these games to be closer to what Breath of the Wild is gameplay-wise, but it's very difficult to pull that off. That's a pretty amazingly constructed game world.
Yeah.
And a difficult game to test as well, make sure that it's not buggy. But there are clearly other games. Like if you just look at you look on the Switch, you've got games like Axiom Verge that look a lot like Metroid, right? Is that okay? You've got Fast RMX, which looks exactly like an F-Zero would today. You certainly have Wargroove, which is Advance Wars, but at least they changed the tile set to be medieval, right? But the game is really rooted in it. So
and, yeah, Wargroove is arguably more shameless than this, right? In that it's taking style and mechanics and adding upon it.
And part of the title. More.
Yeah, even that. But the difference is that there hasn't been an Advance Wars game in a decade or whatever, and Breath of the Wild is still so fresh in people's memories to the point where a lot of people are still playing it.
That's it. Yeah. So do you think people wouldn't react as negatively if there was a Breath of the Wild clone that had a completely different art style, completely different characters, but you're climbing things in the world and you're fighting big monsters and you're unlocking these temples and stuff? Do you think people would be more open to it? Is it that when it's the look people react most negatively?
I think it's more difficult to have a negative knee-jerk reaction when when you look at screenshots and it doesn't look totally similar.
Yeah.
I think if these games had a different art style, I don't think people would draw that comparison. Whereas if you had a game that had very obvious gameplay mechanics that were exactly the same, someone who played it early would write those comparisons, and that's how they would find out instead.
Yeah, and also it's those visuals are the only thing people have until they get to play the game, right? You know, once you play this, it'll probably be very clear that it's not just a Breath of the Wild copy straight up, but all we have right now are screenshots and a gameplay trailer and like cell phone recordings from China Joy like their booth at China Joy, right? So like these are the only tools we have to have these conversations with, and so it's so easy to just be like, yeah, this looks like this, you know, and we don't really have the tools to say, oh well, I played it and it's not like that at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. There, you know, certainly when Ocarina of Time came out, there was this time period where we said, all right, somebody nailed a 3D action adventure game. Everybody's going to copy it. There'll be all these games that look like it. That didn't actually happen because it's so difficult to make games like that. You know, you had a couple of titles that were similar, and then obviously the genre evolved a bit more with, you know, your Assassin's Creeds and those titles, you know, Prince of Persia before that. But it's kind of funny when games now start with the art style. Like that almost seems backwards, you know? It's like you're drawing a comparison to the art style. I don't know. I love Breath of the Wild. If somebody were able to do a game like it, I would actually be happy and not mad. But if somebody is doing a game that looks a little bit like it,
somebody's doing a game like it that looks like it, and it's called Breath of the Wild 2, and Nintendo's making it.
They are making that game. You're right. Yeah.
Or whatever it's going to be called, because I guess it technically doesn't have a title yet.
Yeah, but like, look, are you cool with Bloodstained looking like Castlevania?
No, yes. I'm mad about it.
Yes, because it's the original creator, right? Like there are all these nuances to games that look like others, but there are clear ripoffs out there too.
I think I'm more okay with them when it's very obvious that they made their own assets and everything from scratch. It's when people are pulling animations and assets from other games and just straight up actually ripping them, and that's when I have the biggest problem.
And that's the hilarious thing about this. It's so funny to me that this game drew so much ire because there are dozens and dozens of examples of Chinese companies just bootlegging wholesale Overwatch and Paladins and all of these other games, Hearthstone. Like so many games just get torn apart and repackaged in Chinese, like as like little mobile apps in China and things like that. And yet this one game like just became this lightning rod for anger just because of Breath of the Wild.
People love Zelda.
I know, yeah.
There's this incredible passion worldwide for this franchise and this title. Deservedly so.
And
it's my number one.
I think it might be good for the KF logo.
Bring this up?
What?
Emeka doesn't like Breath of the Wild.
I hate Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, which is why today is also his final time on NVC.
It comes up in ad-offs at least 3 times a week where I have to trash Breath of the Wild just to remind everyone how much I hate that.
Can you finish it so that you can have an honest discussion?
They took away my favorite thing, which is dungeons.
There's
No, those shrines are
No,
not dungeons.
they're a couple big walking dungeons.
No, those ones are whack. Those ones are not. Those ones are not as good as any dungeon in any other Zelda game.
That's true. No. It's they're
Well, like
better
the later
than some.
ones. The later ones.
But the best temples are better than the beasts for sure.
Yeah, temples are better than the beasts. Those were so weak, and then they added an open world, which I don't care about.
Oh my god. Okay.
Oh, I'm just gonna run through this open field,
So-
and there's a moblin over there. Oh, well, I'm just gonna run past him because who cares?
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
See, I played this game that had lots of really cool things to discover.
I just went straight. I just do shrine, killed Ganon, and then I was like, okay.
Wait, you did beat the game.
Yeah, I beat the game.
Oh, okay,
it was
you
a
did,
waste of
okay.
40-something hours, but at least I've had more fun arguing about it than actually playing it.
Terrible.
Well, at least you got some enjoyment out of it.
Look.
So based on this, maybe Decay of Logos will be a better Zelda game for you.
Yeah.
If it's Breath of the Wild, but they put dungeons in it, I'll buy it.
I don't think they'll do that. But thank you for your opinion, however wrong.
Should I
Yeah,
walk
no,
out
we
now?
appreciate it.
Well, I think maybe this ire that these games have drawn will maybe be good for it because maybe all press is good press, right? So
I wouldn't have known about this
Yeah.
if this
Yeah.
hadn't blown up like this, and I'm actually really
Yeah.
intrigued now.
I
kinda
am
wanna
super
play
intrigued.
it.
And
It
honestly,
looks cool.
I love Zelda. I love games like Zelda. So you know what? Whatever, bring it on. As long as you're not actually reusing assets that Nintendo made.
And is it only on PS4, this Genshin Impact?
So Genshin Impact right now is PC and PS4 right
Okay.
now. And
And we
Decay
don't
of-
even know if it's coming to the West.
we don't.
Yeah.
Who knows? But they have a whole website in English.
Yeah,
So why would
probably.
they be going through the effort of doing that?
Especially now
Yeah.
that we've covered it.
And Decay of Logos is coming out on the Switch on the 29th. So if you're interested in that, I mean, I want to get it. I think it's really cool. It's like kind of up my alley, and I want a big white elk pet. So
But if it's a clone, we'll break our PS4s, right?
yes,
Yes.
absolutely not.